who are you?
Well, Mark, that's a question for the ages. But if I were to say at the core, I feel like I have the heart of a servant. From a very young age, I was always really enjoyed being of service to others. It was confusing at first because, you feel like, well, I can get taken advantage of and, things like that. But when you're pure about it and you have discernment, which you learn with the ages, it's a good thing. I was very fortunate to find what I do.
The heart of a servant, or being of service. That dovetails really nicely into a question of a mutual friend of ours, Dave, who wanted to know about this, and so did I, frankly. So it was a beautiful topic or question that he brought up. And this is someone I know that you've known for quite some time. And what he told me, he said, Mark's got one of the biggest hearts out there, and he's an incredibly humble guy. He's an incredibly accomplished guy, and there's a lot of outward facing, aspects to your work and so forth. And he's like, I would love to know where that giant heart come from. Like, where there's so much creativity, I think, that's born from your heart. Like, who instilled that? Or I'm assuming at an early age.
Well, yeah. It's certainly, there was some formative years that were really, really special. My grandmother, who lived really next door, she just was such a beautiful person and always opened up her home. She was very playful. She let us do things that we shouldn't do, like eat a whole pound of crispy bacon while watching cartoons as a 7-year-old. And then,
great.
Watching TV and letting me drive when I was 12. But she was very playful, and she always had a space for us, no matter what was happening in our lives. And I think the humility just comes from a experience I had in my early 20s where I had drowned, or I really kind of lost consciousness, but was pulled out by who is a person who's now a lifelong friend, not surprisingly. And, that is the humility. We're just a breath away. And when you experience that, you realize that you don't have a lot of control and you need other people to be there for you.
So I didn't know that part of your story. What was it, coming out of that? I almost want to ask, like, what were some of the questions on your mind, or how did you process such a traumatic experience like that?
Well, being young and, unaware of a lot of things, and I had accomplished a lot by then. I moved over to Europe, without any support, and did my culinary apprenticeship, went to culinary school, did apprenticeships in Michelin restaurants. And, I felt like that I had a lot of control and power in my life. And frankly, I was not only very sick, you have like pneumonia-like feeling because you have water in your lungs, but, feverish for a while. Like it seemed like a week or more. But I was actually down. I was depressed. I felt like, had it not been for Peter, I would not be here. And I didn't realize that, I always felt I was an island unto myself and could make anything happen. But I realized when I was out there watching that beautiful sunset on the sand dunes way out, getting dragged out by a riptide, that I actually didn't have any control. It was just so simple. People are having picnics up on the sand dunes while I'm like struggling for my life. So it was depressing at first, I'll be honest. I don't talk about that much, but I just didn't know how to deal with it.
Yeah. Did it flip though? I'm assuming at one point you were able to kind of turn the page to that chapter or process in some capacity, but was it, I get the feeling that from what you're sharing, there was a lot of accomplishment, there was a lot going on, a lot of success and so forth. And of course, a humbling experience to say it very lightly, but it wasn't a light thing. But I guess how has that shaped how you live today, moving forward from a moment like that?
Well, I do. And when I came out of that, I did recover, and I just went after life, knowing how precious it was, but not in always good ways. I just didn't sleep, 3 to 4 hours a night for 30 years, and went after every single opportunity, good, bad, or indifferent. Was, responsible in many ways with my work and certainly with family and friends, but irresponsible in others. And because I just didn't know how long it would last, And I think now, as I have grace, made it a few more years. We both
Sure.
have the hair to prove it. I just am grateful. And, I got into breathing, because I was literally a breath away. So I've had a really interesting experience through reading and meeting David Nesser, who wrote Breath, and getting
Mm,
kind of deeply diving in and kind of looking at what Wim Hof has done and things like that. But that breath hold stuff and
yeah.
breathing and the precious breath and just being aware of of your breath in life, that's been really cool, actually.
Yeah. It is. I mean, we talked about this where we met, which was the Gathering of Titans, a business group and conference. And when I say that, it almost feels too minimal, because it's so much more than that. But part of the thing I was speaking about, as you remember probably, is just the power of a breath, right?
Hmm.
And how I think we all forget about that in as life goes, because things are so busy, and you fall into this like autopilot, scenario where things are happening so quickly. But if we could just slow down and take a breath, the reset, there's a whole other world of opportunity there. Plus, it just feels a hell of a lot better too when we can somewhat regulate our nervous system. I'm
Yes.
curious for you, and then I do want to go back to when you were 14, when it seems like when all this started, especially at least in the culinary world, but kind of present day. How do you incorporate some of this breath work into still fast paced environments, right?
Well, I'm very driven and type A and, like focused and, I have all the ADD, OCD blessings that we talk about in the entrepreneurial world. But the truth of the matter is, I don't do my best work. I'm not my best person if I don't do breath work. I
Mm,
find if I'm really getting jacked up or I'm really getting intense or spinning out of control in an issue or in my mind or whatever, I now stop and do some breath work. And that pause really reframes me. It slows everything down, as you've taught and have said, Mark. And I'm glad you're sharing that story, but that helps me a lot. So what I do is I do some, breath work in the morning and then
okay.
periodically throughout the day, and don't record this. Oh, I think you are, but
Yeah.
I actually do some when I'm driving.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't
Fair.
think I'll
What
pass
does that
out.
look like though? Is
Well,
that
I'll
just
do
slower,
the,
intentional breathing?
aggressive in and out breathing for at least 30, 35, huffing, if you will.
Yeah.
And then I'll just hold it, not to the point of, anything dangerous, but maybe,
Yeah.
a minute and a half in the car. Sorry about that.
So I do Wim
But
Hof
no,
breathing. So I
I'm
understand
pretty,
where you're coming from, but anyone else listening who has not, so minute and a half, that sounds dangerous. Which
well, yeah, it's
with
not, if you
training
can,
though, that's actually not too bad when it comes to,
yeah,
breath holds. So anyway,
I'm not world class. I can do, 2 minutes, almost 3 minutes, but
sure.
it seems like a long time. But if you have to be very calm and in a very calm
Yeah.
place. I would never do that in the car. For me, I
Yeah.
just do it mostly at traffic station, stops and things like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
I do a very aggressive, and then I just release, and it just helps. Any
Yeah.
kind of breath, work, it helps.
Yeah. Have you found ways to incorporate that in the kitchen or in the front of the house when things are quickly moving, and there's
Well,
a lot of things going on, let's just say.
Well, breath work's weird. I recorded myself doing it and I was going to post it, and my daughter said, absolutely not, Dad. But so, and she was right, by the way. No, in the front of the house and stuff, I teach the pause,
Yeah.
and the pause is really, I always take any situation, and what I teach myself, but my staff too, my team, is just come up with three different scenarios or three different options of how you could react to this or what action you could take. And then go through those and take the best option and move. And just by virtue of doing that, it rechannels and refocus, but in a very efficient way. I want them to do it in nanoseconds, because in the front of the house, action is required very, very, very quickly and
Yeah.
efficiently. So, but that pause of reframing and coming up with three different options of how you can react changes how you react, because you're discerning. Then you're actually choosing how you're going to act
Yeah, for
on a
sure.
situation.
I love that. One of the things that comes to mind, I had Patrick McEwen on the show, another
Hmm.
breathwork expert or practitioner, and I think him and James Nestor have chatted as well and shared their practices or co-blurbed their books and things like that. And one of the practices he left with me that I feel like might be helpful in these scenarios is just these kind of long, deep, slow, intentional nasal breathing in scenarios like that, where like I do this before jumping onto any stage. So, because again, I'm kind of like you have some Wim Hof style practices, love those. I mean, if you start doing that before you go in front of anyone, they'll be like, oh boy, I think we made the wrong choice here. But you can stand there. And even in front, as you're approaching the table, I would imagine just through your nose, like taking something like a
Hmm.
slow breath, and that's his whole thing is like it's a deep breath, but then it's slow and just slowing the nervous system down. And most people can't even tell you're doing that, but the the effects, like you immediately kind of calm and regulate and so forth. So anyway, because a lot of people talk about the more accelerated breathing and the holds, like what we're speaking about. And I just
Hmm.
remember him sharing that. I'm like, yeah, it's a really good, useful, practical tip, I think, right? In these environments
Yes.
where you can't get into a sequence like that. So
Yes.
yeah.
That's way more socially acceptable.
Yeah, exactly. At least for now. Well, until we bridge into everything
I
else.
do. I'm going to try that around, when I'm around, the public.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so Mark, like, I went too far in because I had to follow the breathwork trail,
Hmm.
of course, but I did want to talk a little bit more about, well, and I can't believe everything I read on the internet, but so you can correct me here, but it seems like your fascination with the culinary world started at a pretty young age, around
Yes.
14 or so, and I know you spent, I think, what was it, 5 or 6 years in Amsterdam or in Europe training
In
and
Europe.
whatnot.
Yes.
Yeah, like I guess what was the entry point for you? Like, why this industry?
Well, I think that, it found me. That's my opinion now or my observation after all these years. But so I became obsessively fascinated with it after I received a book called La Technique, which is by
Hmm.
Jacques Pépin, also a friend now and mentor. And he wrote this book, and I was given to this book by a friend when I was 14 or 15. And I remember it was before summer, and I just obsessively went through it and cooked everything in the book and did every technique and drove my family crazy. But that's where it latched. I just became endlessly interested in it. And from that, I started to cook family meals and Thanksgivings and things like that. And once my grandmother, the one I spoke about earlier,
Yeah,
she pulled me aside when I was cooking Thanksgiving dinner at our house and helping her. And she said, "Did you ever think about this as a career?" And I was like mortified because, again, this is back in the late 70s, and there was no Food Network, there was no
yeah,
Anthony Bourdain. Julia
yeah,
Child had been off the air for a number of years, so there wasn't a notion of it being a career, or there was no celebrity around it for sure. So I'm like, I'm going to be a businessman. I didn't know what that was, but
yeah, yeah,
so that's how it all started. I think it really found me. And then after high school, I was going to do a gap year, they call it. For me, it was just a lack of really viable options. So I
okay,
went to Amsterdam and was able to secure it's a funny story. I got that, but we can go into it later. But
yeah,
an apprenticeship in a hotel in Amsterdam, a full European apprenticeship.
yeah. Is that this? Is it called the Sonesta? Is that how you say that?
Yes, the
Yeah.
Amsterdam Sonesta Hotel. Yes.
Okay. Well, take
Hmm.
us there. Yeah. What was it like? What was that
Well,
experience
that
like?
was crazy cool. I mean, I got it by finding through hook or by crook the owner of it who lived in the Keys in Florida. And I drove down there in a tropical storm at spring break in my senior year and asked for a job. I was soaking wet. He didn't let me in the house. And I got
Wow.
the job or got the opportunity. It was not, it was an apprenticeship. Just they took 3 apprentices a year there in the hotel. 2 were Dutch and I was American. Of course, I was super popular for that
Yeah.
reason,
Yeah.
like being American number one, but also taking a Dutch slot. So I had to really work hard and prove myself. The chef was a Swiss guy. He was at the end of his career. He'd worked for the Rockefellers and all kinds of great properties all over the world. super intense, old school, just that classic, screaming and
Yeah.
abusive, not about physically or personally, but just about standards, incredibly intense.
Yeah.
I couldn't touch food for the first month, only canned goods. And then I could touch dairy, and then I could touch, once I learned how to manage a walk-in, then I could actually cook for the employees. It's a very strict process. And eventually you work all the stations and saute and pastry and garde manger and, all that stuff. So I did it
Wow.
all.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then from there, was it Paris?
Yes, I wanted to continue. I just fell in love with it. And I made a decision at that point that I was going to have my own restaurant with
How
no
old were
means
you
or
about this
pathway to
time?
it. I was 18 when I lived in Amsterdam.
Okay. Wow.
Um, and I, applied to schools all over. There was a school in Paris that was boutique at the time, as called École de Cuisine La Varenne, and it was only took 10, professional students a year, and they had a long waiting. I think it was a 3-year thing, waiting list. So I did the thing that an 18-year-old would do. I just called them from a payphone every week, and I wrote them every week, and eventually, after 3 months of this barrage of the and the French love that, of course,
Yeah.
insistent Americans. But they said if I promised never to write or call again and send a check, then I would have a slot. One came available, so I got
Wow.
in.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny, as you're sharing all of this, I mean, I know, we haven't been speaking for that long, but it's already kind of coming full circle to that big heart conversation. Like I can feel the heart in what you do. And I'm projecting here, but I almost feel like there's nothing that could have gotten in the way of what you're doing today because it's coming from, feels like such an authentic place that like legitimately lights you up, right? Like what is
Yeah.
it about the kitchen, the restaurant, like just this work that just seems like fuels your soul?
Well, from my family, well, there's a lot. First, I love hard work. I was taught that as a young person. My dad was in the marine construction business, and we worked from the time we were 6 years old on. So early in the morning, my brother and I. So I never shied away from that. I actually get a lot of pleasure out of it. And the kitchens are intense and they're hard, and restaurants are hard. 97% of it is just extremely intense, high adrenaline, chaotic, if you will, pace.
Yeah.
I love it. It makes me calm. With ADD, the natural Ritalin is adrenaline, and either you choose to do things that are very high risk and sometimes illegal, or I found the kitchen, which makes me very calm. So that was really a beautiful thing about it. And then what I found is that your role as a restaurateur or a chef or a server or a bartender is to serve. If you take it purely and you accept that and you want to be great at it and be successful, then you must really, really love to be of service. And that's good, bad, or indifferent. I mean, people can be challenging.
Mm-hmm.
It's very emotional. Eating is emotional. Going out sometimes is emotional. Dates are, marriages are everything. So you're dealing with a lot of very intense human emotion at times. But if you put love and your heart behind it, you can really change the atmosphere.
Yeah.
And so I
Well,
challenge my staff to do that, and I like to do that.
and it just makes me think like it's we really do put a lot of value, and I think for the right reason in sharing a meal with people that we love, people that we enjoy, and that whole experience, right? Like of course the food has to be good, but I mean it's the whole experience. I'll never
Mm-hmm.
forget. I mean, I don't live there now, but my wife and I, we lived in Montreal for 5 years, and
Mm-hmm.
I think some of the best culinary experiences we've ever had in our life, and a lot of the times it was like, wow, this is the best meal I've ever had. But it was not just that; it was the wine pairing and
Mm-hmm.
the atmosphere of the restaurant, and it's just this. Like I have goosebumps just kind of describing. Like they stamp into your memory bank, right? And that takes, I think we forget that takes a lot of intention and great people
Mm-hmm.
doing so. but at the same time, I always wonder, because at the flip side, I hear how intense kitchens are,
Mhm.
and I have a lot of actually. I wouldn't say maybe they're not ex chefs. You're probably never, when you're once a chef, always a chef in some capacity. But a lot of people that have actually left the industry. And I have a
Mhm.
dear friend, I got a couple questions from him. So he kind of was in some of your world. He was on Top Chef Canada over here, but had to
Mhm.
leave because it was just like it was eventually got too much even for him and so forth. So it's like, how do you balance that? How have you found to balance that intensity and bring, I don't know, I would imagine bringing your energy, which feels very
Yeah.
calm and um grounding in a way, so that you can provide those experiences and so that the team can provide those experiences without being in this massive stressful state.
Well, I could talk for quite a bit about it because there is, there's a lot to it. It
Yeah.
isn't, you have, and it's very simple. I mean, simplicity is a complex thing, really, but I don't let things stick. There have been chapters of my life where I'd work, 14, 15 hours a day, for 60 days in a row. And I would let all this human emotion and all this stuff stick with me. It didn't pass through me. And there was a really tremendously, and he's still a dear friend, a very special human who I saw, he's in the limelight. He's quite well known. And I saw him kind of go through life and just always be peaceful and have a great heart and spirit about him and always have time for everybody and be a loving person. And I observed him for a long time. And at first I thought he just didn't care.
Mm.
He wasn't paying attention. And then I learned that I asked him once and he said, well, I don't let it stick. I let it go through me. I'm very interested when someone's talking to me or, they want my autograph or whatever it is. I genuinely love them and I care and take the time and I see them as people, but it doesn't stay with me. I just keep moving. And I thought about that a lot and, I
Mm.
tried to adopt a little bit of that, but there was also practices of, breathing and meditation and, time in nature is very important to me. We live in a place where you can get that very easily. Just quick hikes in the Phoenix Mountain Reserve.
Yeah.
That's very restorative for me. And I found that naturally, but it's a combination of a lot of things. I think every human needs that balance and that reset. Um, and I try to find it and routinely actually.
Do you remember,
So
Mark, like when that became more intentional for you? Were there any moments or stories that you can share where either, something
yes.
had to change or something evolved?
Well, I'm a slow learner, I'm not the brightest bulb, but so I always heard about meditation and all this stuff. And I did have an experience where I became very interested in it. I'm going to drop a name. I might need some back adjustment, but I had
Yeah.
the opportunity to cook for the Dalai Lama and have a private audience with him. And I met him a couple times. And, so before that, I wanted to study Tibetan, the spirituality, Tibetan Buddhism and also meditation. And as a driven, chef, I could not do it. I wanted to be great at it. And I felt very disillusioned and very less than for years after that. Had a lot of support, had a Tibetan Rinpoche help me for a couple of years, try to help me. And
Sure.
then finally I let it all go. And I just said, it's not that I'm good at it. You have to give yourself time. I call it quiet time. And when I started doing that, I did have moments where I call it out of body or whatever you want to call it in a different space. And I don't get attached to those. I don't try to hang on to them. When they happen, I'm very grateful. It's nice. But if I
Yeah.
can just close my eyes and be quiet, then I'm fine with that too.
And
So
just
that's
being in
my
it.
meditation. It's not
What does it
very,
look like, Mark? Like, is it a certain amount of time or like, do you have some sort of a
um,
mantra? Like, what
I,
kind of meditation?
I try to do 20 minutes. Of course, I try to be in a nice environment, but I
Yeah.
think it's actually really cool if you're in a very chaotic environment, an
Yeah.
airport or a plane or whatever,
Yeah.
where I think that's where the most interesting moments come when you're forced to really close and channel and, get into that space. And the more challenging sometimes, the more interesting it is.
Yeah. I had gosh, this is going back many, many years. I interviewed this chef. He had a restaurant in the UK, but we were in his Dubai restaurant, and it was in person. And this is probably 10 years, maybe 8 years ago. And I remember him saying something to the fact of, he's like, I don't really do any of this stuff that you're, talking about. So, but I'm happy to do, the interview and so forth, which I'm always like, oh, this is these are the best interviews, right? Because within like 10 minutes, he starts describing this scenario. He's like, there's this beautiful time in the day. It's early morning and the produce is just delivered. And I'm typically the only person there, and I'm, chopping celery or something. And he's like, it's just this tranquility. And it's like, there it is, like that's the moment. And that's the meditation. And I'm like, thank God you shared that, because how many of us, maybe we're not in a professional kitchen, but we all have to eat. And can all have that moment of meditation or presence in, preparing food or whatever it is, right? Or to your point, like being in any environment and just having the ability to just kind of quiet things down. Like it doesn't have to be more complicated than that.
Well, Mark, I think you nailed it. There is meditation in that repetitive prepping, or that beauty of the morning, David Steindl-Rast, a great Benedictine monk, has written a lot about stuff, but anyone can have that mystic moment or that meditative moment. To get out of themselves. It comes with time, but I think you described it very well. So did he. That is, in my view, meditation.
Yeah.
What he's doing.
I love it. I want to talk a little bit about, this is still, of course, within the work that you do, but a different, I guess, flavor to it. I mean, this is going back when you won Iron Chef, and then it sounds like there's been some Emmys as well, and some TV shows that you've been a part of, like that whole world. I mean, before we get in, I'd love to see what the parallels are and how what's worked for your mind in those different environments and so forth. But first, like, how did all of that stuff come to be?
Well, I think I'm just very fortunate. And I get lucky. So with the Iron Chef thing, I never watched food TV. I still don't. And my staff back then it was the number one show on Food Network at the time, or on cable, I guess. My staff kept saying, you got to do this show, Iron Chef. If you ever get a chance, chef, you got to do this. And I was doing local TV. I was the resident chef on the biggest news channel here. Okay. And so I didn't think much of it, and I got a call in my office at work at the restaurant one day, and it was Bruce Seidel, and he's like, hey, I'm Bruce Seidel. I created, Iron Chef America. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. I saw your show this morning. I did live TV that morning. I'm at a hotel here. I'd really like you to come on the show. And I was like, this is close to saying no, because I say no, because I say no to a lot of.
You didn't send anything in, right?
No, I didn't do anything, but I do say no. I used to say no to a lot of things I should say yes to, but I remember it in the back of my head. My chefs, the people I worked with, were like, do Iron Chef, do Iron Chef. Yeah. I was like, all right, I'll do it.
Yeah.
And so I didn't even know what it was. So I watched it on Food Network, and I was like, oh my Lord, I can't believe that I said yes to this. It's like a real competition. And so from that point forward, I just went nuts, and I I went all crazy, and I watched the show, broke it down, but built my team, my two sous chefs. They had to apply for it, audition actually. My actual chef at the time, my number one chef at Tarbell's, did not make the team at the time because he didn't have the aggressiveness I was looking for. And then we trained, 6 days a week. Every day we had cameras bumping into us. We bought all the same equipment, the KitchenAid equipment that was on the set at the time, just so that we were familiar with it. And we had a 97% chance of losing, statistically, and in front of national TV, in front of all my friends. So I went to win, but I had an understanding that it was unlikely. And, I was peaceful about it, but I was very prepared. My team was, and we won. Yeah. And we're the only one to win that season, but it was challenging. And I do like to say it's a bad joke. But if anyone tells you, Mark, that winning isn't everything, they're wrong.
Yeah, exactly. It
it's
felt
really
pretty
pretty
good,
good.
didn't it?
Oh
Well,
yeah,
yeah,
we
but
had so much.
especially,
I didn't sleep that night.
yeah, but especially, I mean, this is where, again, where I share Dave's sentiments. I mean, you're so humble. Like, I mean, you put in a lot of work.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
I mean, I haven't heard. I mean, it's not to say people haven't done this, but it seems like you went to some great lengths to create the environment so that,
Hmm.
and this is where, as a mental fitness practitioner, like this is the sweet stuff for me. I mean, you're really conditioning the mind and even just kind of spatial awareness to operate. So when you're actually in that zone, like an Olympic athlete does,
Yeah.
this is not necessarily, new things for the mind to absorb and handle. And because there's already enough
Yeah.
pressure knowing that this is being filmed and real and the real competition, right?
Yeah,
Wow.
I did approach it that way. And at my best self, that's what I do. I've had plenty of times where I've completely been a wing it kind of guy, but in this case, I didn't, and it was really good because I have to tell you a quick story about
Yeah.
God, who was it? He's a famous guy. Anyway, had his own show, but he was there that day, and he was kind of like part of the whole deal. And um, he came to one of my sous chefs prior to we could turn everything on, make sure it worked. And he comes up next to me. He goes, "Did you just turn that on? You can't do that. You just forfeited. I mean, we're going to film it, but you guys lost." And it was like, and the guy was sweating and nervous the whole time. Something happened. He cracked, and we're filming, and he's really nervous and not his usual trained self. And at the end, when they announced us winning, and he was a big guy, like 6'2", we were sitting way in the back, and he jumped up and he goes, "I'm gonna kill him."
Yeah.
I had to get on his back, jump on his back and stop him.
Yeah.
It was pretty funny.
Well, that's
It,
intense.
yeah, I mean, they really tried to mess you up, honestly, but yeah, I won't say his name because it would forever disparage him for doing that. But
Sure,
the
sure,
famous
sure.
Food Network personality that did it.
So I mean, this has been, when was that? Was that 2000,
That
around
was that was
2007?
2007. Yeah, it was quite
Yeah.
a while, quite a while ago.
It's been a while,
Almost
but I mean,
seriously.
I guess, how has that experience kind of, followed you or helped you even in present day in anything that you're doing?
Well, I pretty much forget about that stuff after I'm done with it. And I've actually never seen it. I've seen bits of it. But
Wow.
I
You
move
haven't
I
watched
move
the
on, and
episodes?
no, I never watch it. In some of my shows, I've been forced by the producers to do it just to help, my presentation. But
Sure.
I move on. I really
Yeah.
do. I mean, it's very nice. It was a great experience, and winning was great. But also more of the camaraderie, the teamwork. Paul, Jim, and I doing it together. It's just something we'll always have. But I never live in that glory days past.
Mhm.
And until if someone brings it up, it's great, but I don't think about it actually quite at all. For me, you mentioned earlier, how do I keep going? Well, every day's a new day, and I feel like I'm opening the restaurant or whatever life for the first time every day.
Mm,
So I have a simple approach to that,
I
which
love that.
also precludes me from thinking about past heroics. I'm trying to not think so much about past failures. I'm still working on that.
Sure, sure. You're human. Shocking, Mark.
Yeah.
So how do you navigate, I guess, the present chapter and ones that are developing? Like, I guess, how do you make the decisions? Because I mean, I imagine you're faced with many opportunities and I mean, you're
Mhm.
in different spaces from what I can see from,
Mhm.
of course, the restaurant and TV and so forth. But then um, there's the wine as well. I mean,
Mhm.
there seems to be a lot of, they're all connected, but the branches and so forth. But so I guess, how do you make those decisions on what feels right to pursue versus, maybe that's not aligned, whatever it is.
Well, that's a great question because I do need help there, and I think we all should have help. But I create filters for myself, but I also I try to surround myself with people that great advisors, great friends, and great people. And I have a wonderful family and wife that help just kind of, and I as much as it is possible, I do the pause we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
And I now say, well, let me think about that. I'll get back to you in a couple, Monday or 3 days later. And from my yes-itis, which I say yes to everything naturally and want to help everybody and want to do everything and think everything is a great idea, that's my nature. I have to put a space between it, and I have to put
Mhm.
people between it that help me be more discerning and more selective. Because as we all only have 24 hours in a day, I have to make sure I'm very intentional of how I use them.
Yeah. Yeah. So then is there within those 3 days, is it just something that, okay, it's on your mind, so it's present and it's kind of
Mhm.
stewing in a way, or is it like you intentionally take I don't know, a long walk or something like that to get clarity on a decision? Like what works for you?
Both those things, long walks, time. And honestly, if it sounds like a great idea when I first hear it and forget all about it, and 3 days, I said I was going to get back to that person, then it usually means something.
Yeah,
If
that's a
it
sign.
isn't, sometimes things grow in me, like an idea or an opportunity will start or be suggested or offered. And, it grows in 3 days. Like I begin to really get excited or imagine it being a possibility. And I think that it's, you know, really okay to say no. That's always been hard for me. But I think my dad always said no is the most underutilized word in the English language. And I think he was right
Yeah.
about that. But as a people pleaser, it's always been difficult to say no. But if you do it right and you do it early and often, for the right reasons, then it's actually a gift.
Ah, so
The gift
so
of
true.
goodbye.
Yes, well said. I'm
Mhm.
curious if, well, not if, I imagine you've mentored many and people have come to you for advice and so forth. But I kind of want to paint the picture of 14-year-old you, and if they were walking into your office or your restaurant, and that you could only give them one piece of advice at that point in their life, like what's the non culinary advice that you would give them?
um, well, right away, a lot of self reflection and self awareness, and not living from the outside in, but from the inside out, and develop methods very early to do that. It'll save a lot of pain and grief and time and conflicting relationships and things, I think. And make no your no and yes your yes. Live simply. I think the word love, is overused as gratefulness typically is, and humility. But I think love anchors everything. And, because fear cannot exist in a true state of love, and anger cannot. And,
Hmm.
to understand how to approach life that way. But everyone needs guardrails. Life is complicated. And I use the word discernment, more than judgment. I think judgment is, you're really judging yourself, but being discerning is okay. It's For me, it's painful to be discerning sometimes when I've just said I can't do that, or it doesn't serve me to be in this environment. But I'm growing more flexible, more muscle around that. But I think for young people, you're pulled and sold so much and through outward inputs. We all are as humans. We're prone to
Yeah.
it, right? But to really just pause, you said pause again, just pause and reflect on everything and just be okay with if that doesn't serve you and just move on.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've said anything there, but
Yeah, I know you said a lot. You said a lot of really good things, I think. I mean, because I do spend time in schools and so forth, trying to bring these practices and the idea of mental fitness to them, and because I wish I had this at a young age, right? And because it's
Mhm,
just of course, I'm biased, but it really helps everything else that you're
mhm,
working on, and also, first and foremost, helps you show up as the best version of yourself, which then the ripple effect that can be quite exponential. So
mhm.
you have a daughter?
I do, daughter and
Yeah.
son. Yeah,
Daughter and
older
son.
daughter, younger son. Yeah.
So as a final question, if you think of those two beautiful humans, what do you think they're most proud about dad?
Ooh, I, you know, I don't know. Um, I would like to think that I'm unwavering in my love and support of them, but not, in an indulgent way, or
Yeah,
I don't do that to make them entitled. I work very hard to. It's very hard in this today's environment not to
sure.
get succumb to that. But I think they would say I always show up, and I'm very even, thoughtful, and I think just really loving and understanding, but still firm and honest, truthful, with
Yeah,
them. And I've always been very open. They had more truth at a younger age than probably most kids did, because I treated them mostly like adults from the time they could really speak.
I
It's
love
just
it.
been my way. I'm not saying it's the right way, but
Yeah, yeah.
um, yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't know you obviously for uh, it hasn't been that long. I mean, we got to spend some nice time together in person over 4 days, and then this conversation, of course. And I can't help but say I feel like I think they know that they're pretty lucky to have you in their life and as a guide and a mentor, just based on uh, everything I've heard from people that really respect you and the research I've done for this conversation and everything you've shared. I think everyone listening can feel that. They can feel
Hmm.
again coming back to that heart kind of for the win. It's a beautiful thing, Mark, and I want to thank you
Thank
for
you.
taking time, of course, and saying yes to coming on this show. But I think a higher thank you for just following your dreams and passion and like this, but I think it's a good reminder. Like the ripple effect of you doing that has created so many experiences for people that, as I mentioned, I think are just stamps in our life, in our soul. And that I know it's not just you, it's the team as well. But I mean, a
Hmm.
lot of that stems from, you making some decisions to uh, follow your dreams. And that's a beautiful, beautiful thing. I think we need more inspiration like that in the world. So thank you.
Thank you, Mark. This has been wonderful. I just so enjoy spending time with you. I'm so glad we connected at GOT.